But the British Empire, right, ruled over by monarchies, but really has been a capitalist system, a global capitalist system for a long time. The monarchy is kind of more of a symbol, a relic of the old, because capitalism actually loves to romanticize about the prior period. And of course, when you're a victor, capitalists, they were victorious over the feudalists. When you're victorious over that class, yeah, you can really revise history, right? So what's happened is that, especially in the neoliberal era, the queen had become, and has become, and still to this day, if you see how people are reacting to her death, a celebrity. I mean, a war criminal, a colonialist, imperialist has become a celebrity. And it's sickening. And I've seen this since my childhood. Even in the United States, people follow this garbage. They look at these British tabloids on the aisles of the grocery stores, etc., and the delis and in the convenience stores, wherever. They're there, right? The Sun, all those things. Look at them. They follow their lives like they're celebrities, like they're Beyonce, like they're Kim Kardashian, right? That's what the Queen had become. But the legacy remains. The legacy is still here. And it's really a whitewash over this legacy. The Queen is a war criminal. Look, Killer Mike said it in his song Reagan. I'm glad Reagan's dead. I'm glad the Queen's dead. I don't care when McCain dies, when these war criminals and imperialists die. I just don't. I'm not going to get into civility, all of that. It's garbage. It has absolutely no place for the working class, for oppressed people. There's no place for that, right? George Jackson said in Blood in My Eye, we need to develop perfect hate and perfect love for the people and perfect hate for the oppressors. And to me, we need to build that righteous anger. And I think a lot of it already exists. Just look at how people in Ireland, people of Irish descent all across the world, in Ireland in particular, celebrating this. Black Twitter, we were told, we're as it's called, also celebrating. Africans across the world celebrating. Why? Because the Queen was a colonizer, an imperialist, a racist. They all are. She comes from a family that has spilled the bloods of countless millions to enrich themselves. Under a capitalist system, which is supposed to be more egalitarian than feudalism, she and her family enriched themselves. And now that lineage, I don't even know what to say, thankfully, because as you know, it doesn't matter when the name dies. It doesn't matter when an individual dies. All this wealth, this status, it's all going to be passed down. And now, though, there's no queen. So there is an interruption. And I just find it so heinous and just disgusting, right? It's as disgusting as, it's probably more disgusting, but it's just as disgusting as cheering on and calling, right? What did AOC call John McCain? One of the most honest people she's ever met, right? It's just like that. There's all this civility and respectability for the elite that's cultivated, right? It's part of this American exceptionalism, Western exceptionalism design, ideological design. In the absence of anything worthwhile talking about, there's nothing worthwhile about the Queen. There's nothing worthwhile about policy, about politics. Nothing she did we could say, yes, thank you for the people. No. So what has the ruling class done? It's deified the elite to a degree that it's hard to puncture through that. Even people like Elon Musk, even people like Zuckerberg, these people have, Zuckerberg is really hated now, but there was a time when he was really loved, right? So there's this deification to the point that it takes years to just get the point. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, to treat the ruling class like gods is an ideological byproduct of information warfare, which is being done to us because, well, class warfare is at its most acute right now. The misery, the poverty, the mass accumulation of profits for the few at the expense of the many, the endless wars, the austerity, the climate catastrophe, on and on and on and on and on, right? This world is unstable because of people like Queen Elizabeth II. This world is suffering because of people like her. This world is worse because of people like her. But we're supposed to deify her because she wears a nice dress and she looks nice and she's a nice person, and the TV is always on her and the media is always on her. And oh, look at those diamonds in her hair that were stolen from African nations, and because of neocolonialism and slaughtering of children and all that. Who cares about all that? Look at the queen. Oh, feel bad for the queen. Man, F the queen. F the queen. I don't care at all about the queen. I've never cared about her. Look, how you entertain yourself is your business, all right? You can entertain yourself any way you want. You can, I don't care, right? We all have to have leisure, activity. I'm not a purist in that way. I'm not going to judge individuals. I know a lot of working class people that love the queen, love to watch the queen. But at the same time, we're not going to hold back, because I don't think working class people are dumb. I don't think oppressed people are dumb. I think you can have serious conversations, even if it makes people uncomfortable sometimes. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, I think that is one thing interesting I find about the kind of hardcore neoliberals, and then the hardcore, let's say, more, let's say, like anti-snowflake right-wingers. Some of them call themselves leftists. Some of them call themselves on the right. They all have this one thing in common. They're very sensitive, right? So if you criticize an extreme neoliberal who is, who thinks that all their dogma is fact, they go, oh, my safe space. Oh, you're being violent against me, all this nonsense. And then the right wingers say, oh, you don't agree with me. Well, you're just a liberal then, right? You're just a liberal because you're criticizing my Trump or whatever, right? They're all snowflakes, all of them. So if someone gets insulted by the facts about the queen, I don't know what to tell you. I don't know what to say. I don't know where your principles are at. And this could include our working class brothers, sisters, people, right? This could include them as well, because we all know that this propaganda machine does not discriminate. And so we have to have these hard conversations. The queen is dead. Oppressed people are rejoicing everywhere. And we should talk about this legacy of hers. So I want to bring up, this article in Truth Out. It's not that long. So Queen Elizabeth is dead. Her bloody legacy lives on. All right. This is a good article summarizing her bloody legacy. Written by Sharon Zhang today. All right. This was quick. A lot of people were getting these pieces out quick, and I appreciate them. I didn't have time for that today. Queen Elizabeth II, Britain's longest reigning monarch, died today, the age of 96, September 8th, in the royal family's castle in Scotland, according to the Buckingham Palace. The Queen's son, who's 73-year-old Prince Charles, will succeed her as king. Her death has garnered the condolences of world leaders, including Joe Biden, who said the Queen, quote-unquote, defined an era of, quote-unquote, unmatched dignity in the UK. I'm throwing up on my mouth already. For many, particularly in the global West, the Queen's 70-year reign was marked by stability and diplomacy. Under Elizabeth, and the royal family has taken pains to distance itself from the country's politics and the monarchy's long colonial history. But for millions of people who live through and still suffer from the consequences of the royal family's brutal colonialism and racism, both abroad and in the UK, the Queen's legacy will live on in the form of violent and lasting rule that the royal family has overseen and still profits from. Many defenders of the royal family argue that Queen Elizabeth should be shielded from such scrutiny because she distanced herself from this past and attempted to make amends to past and present colonies through events like Commonwealth tours. Critics rebuke this argument, saying that the royal family still hasn't confronted its past or paid reparations to the people who continue to suffer as a result of the British monarchy, decades on from direct colonial rule. The royal family has also faced criticism for appearing to attempt to sweep its history under the rug, especially during the Queen's Platinum Jubilee this year. Quote, by design, as much as by the accident of her long life, her presence as the head of state of the Commonwealth and Association of Britain and its former colonies put a stolid traditionalist front over decades of violent upheaval, end quote, wrote Harvard University professor Maya Jasanoff for the New York Times. Quote, as such, the Queen helped obscure a bloody history of decolonization whose proportions and legacies have yet to be adequately acknowledged. For almost as long as the monarchy has existed, it has been a colonialist and imperialist power, colonizing and exploiting dozens and dozens of countries and territories, in particular in the global south, many of which share the common consequences of poverty and continued oppression. For over centuries, the UK has funneled trillions of dollars from its colonies to enrich itself and continues to profit from its racist past and present to this day. The monarchy was built on slavery, establishing a slave trade that saw the transport of millions of Africans and South and North Americans to other countries. The slave trade was so vast, in fact, that it wasn't until 2015 that the country fully paid off its debts to slave owners from freeing slaves in the 19th century. I mean, can you imagine that? The debts to slave owners were just paid off. That's how vast this just paid off. What year was that? 2015. Elizabeth, whose rule began in 1952, did not herself enact these policies, and she did do her small part to step in when, for instance, Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher refused to help end apartheid in South Africa. But others, like those who directly suffered under British imperialism during her time on the throne, say that she had a direct impact on modern decision-making. Some historians say it's unclear which of the UK's imposed horrors that occurred under her rule, like those of places like Kenya and Ireland, were authorized by her. Others argue that she bears responsibility for these atrocities that happened to begin with. Similarly, this distance between the crown and the country's political decisions often does not hold for victims of Britain's colonial rule that occurred under Elizabeth. The symbolism of her rule does not escape those on the left, who argue that in modern days the throne is a symbol of oppression, whiteness, and vast wealth inequality in the UK, even if mainstream members of the UK's left do not dare advocate for its abolition. Elizabeth was at least partly directly responsible for some of the inequalities the country saw and perpetuated while she was on the throne. In recent years, the crown has resisted calls for reparations for countries like Barbados and Jamaica for their bloody and abominable exploitation in the British slave trade. So, I mean, the Queen is not... this is what's funny. It's like this article even, I can tell the gymnastics. Like there's some hesitation. It's like, yeah, well, she kind of was a little more philanthropic, a little more charitable, a little less direct. She didn't want to be involved in the past. She did these like tours and she didn't want to be associated. Okay. But as this article also says, look, she was on the throne for decades. I mean, we're talking more than half a century. And what did the British Empire do during that time? Some of its most bloodiest, disgusting acts. Like what happened to Ireland? What happened to Kenya? I mean, these places suffered mightily, right? The British put down the Mau Mau rebellion, like just absolutely disgusting slaughter and just mass murder and plunder. And Barbados and Jamaica, which Gerald Horne talks a lot about in his books, right? These were constantly in rebellion against the British Empire. And the brutality of the British against these rebellions was just, we're talking about mass slaughter, children, women, everybody, right? The Maroons in Jamaica were violently repressed. Barbados, right? Africans were making heads roll. So there was a zero tolerance policy by the British, and it was bloody. And so she opposes reparations for these countries which were plundered and looted, and still to this day are some of the poorest countries in the world. So the royal family's record of racism domestically over the past decades also does not reflect well upon the crown. These inequalities have been perpetuated within Buckingham Palace itself. Royal advisors banned, quote-unquote, colored immigrants and foreigners from working in the palace until at least the 1960s, over a decade into Elizabeth's reign. The family's deep-seated racism appears to persist today. In 2020, Duke and Duchess of Sussex Prince Harry and Meghan Markle outright left the royal family over racism within the family, despite protestations from family members like Prince William. So, that's just a brief thing. The Meghan Markle situation, yeah, that was a rough PR situation for them. I mean, honestly, definitely a problem, but the least of what the monarchy has done is perpetuate racism within their own family. But it's all an outgrowth, right? It's all an outgrowth. The Queen is dead. The Queen was a colonialist. She was an imperialist. Her family, the monarchy,